In the ancient world of Arendelle, where magic coursed through the veins of every living thing, the elders ruled with their mastery of the arcane. Towers of wizards rose high, casting shadows over vast kingdoms, and the sky often lit up with spells more brilliant than the stars. Fireballs and lightning bolts were as common as storms, and people revered the magical forces that had shaped their civilization for millennia. But far beyond the enchanted forests and mystical rivers, past the misty borders of this magical realm, a discovery was made of something that did not fit into the world's understanding. It was a strange craft that appeared in the night, descending from the heavens, not with the grace of a falling star, but with the precision of a mechanical marvel. The humans who emerged from this metallic object wore armor unlike any seen before, sleek, polished, and gleaming in the moonlight. They spoke in a language foreign to Arendelle's people, their voices muffled by strange masks. When they approached, a curious crowd gathered, including wizards and soldiers alike, intrigued by the strangeness before them. One of the mages, an old wizard named Yalaron, raised his hand, speaking the ancient words of protection. A barrier of translucent energy shimmered into existence around the crowd. Who dares to intrude upon the realm of Arendelle? His voice boomed. The leader of the newcomers, a tall figure encased in metal, lifted his mask. Beneath, his face was pale but sharp with intelligence. His eyes glimmered with a different kind of light tone of reason, not magic. He smiled faintly. "We come from a place far beyond your skies," he said, in a language the wizards understood as the words echoed magically in their minds. "We are not here to conquer. We are explorers, scientists." Scientists? Yalaron narrowed his eyes. "What magic do you wield? I sense no aura of power around you, no connection to the flows of mana that bind this world." The figure stepped forward, drawing a small, smooth object from his belt. With a flick, the object hummed to life, producing a bright, plasma-like blade that cut through the air with a faint hiss. "This is not magic," the men said. "It's science." At once, the crowd gasped. Even Yalaron hesitated, for the blade in the man's hand had the intensity of a magical construct, yet it lacked the familiar resonance of spells. It seemed to tear through reality itself, without drawing from the world's natural arcane sources. What sort of sorcery was this? "You misunderstand us," the man continued, as he turned off the plasma blade, the hum vanishing. "We don't cast fireballs, nor do we summon lightning. We manipulate the forces of the universe through reason, through understanding, through technology." Yalaron scoffed. "Technology? Your words are strange to my ears, but you still speak of power, and power has its consequences. This science of yours, it may not be magic, but it is dangerous." Another figure stepped forward, this one a woman, shorter but no less imposing, with eyes that scanned the surroundings as if recording every detail. "We do not deny that, Elder, just as your magic can be dangerous in the wrong hands, but we believe there is much to learn from one another. Our plasma is no different from your fireballs, our lasers no different from your lightning." "I doubt that," Yalaron said, gripping his staff. "Fire is fire, and plasma is something else. You speak of your science as though it is superior to magic." "Mo," the man replied, his voice calm, "we do not claim superiority, merely difference. Our science builds upon what we can observe and predict. Magic, as we've studied in worlds like yours, relies on forces that are not easily understood by our methods, but that doesn't mean we can't learn." A murmur swept through the crowd. Some of the wizards exchanged glances. The idea of another force, equal to but separate from magic, unsettled them. For as long as anyone in Arendelle could remember, magic had been the ultimate power. To hear that there was something outside it, something that could rival or even surpass its capabilities, was both fascinating and terrifying. Yalaron, however, remained unconvinced. "Your words are clever, but they do not impress me. What do you intend to do here, in our world of magic, with your science? What is it that you seek?" The man paused before answering. "Knowledge. We seek knowledge, just as you do, but we also believe our worlds have something to offer one another. Perhaps, in time, you will see that our technology and your magic need not be at odds. Together, we could accomplish things neither of us could do alone." "Or," Yalaron countered, his voice hardening, "your technology could be used to destroy everything we have built." The man sighed. "The same could be said of your magic." For a long moment, the two forces stood in silence. The tension was palpable. as if the air itself held its breath, waiting to see whether this meeting of science and magic would end in alliance or in conflict. Yalaron's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but he was a wise elder, and his years had taught him that even the most foreign of powers deserved consideration before judgment. He lowered his staff, but his gaze remained sharp. You may stay for now, strangers from the stars, but make no mistake, if your science proves to be a threat to Arendelle, you will find our magic more than a match. The man nodded, relieved. That is all we ask, a chance. And so, for the first time in the history of Arendelle, magic and science stood side by side, to forces that had never before crossed paths, now on the brink of either collaboration or catastrophe. To be continued. The days following the arrival of the star travelers were tense. The people of Arendelle, steeped in magic, eyed the newcomers with suspicion. Wizards and commoners alike whispered in taverns and along market stalls, wondering what these scientists would bring. The idea that something as powerful as magic could exist without it was too much for many to grasp. Yalaron, however, couldn't shake his curiosity. He found himself thinking about the plasma blade the man had wielded. It was not magic, yet it cut with the precision of a high-level spell. He had seen magic users from other lands with strange abilities before himself had learned it from many, but never had he encountered something that seemed to rewrite the very rules of their reality. On the third day, he received an invitation. The strangers, who called themselves the crew of the Starfire, had set up a temporary camp on the outskirts of the kingdom, near the edge of the great forest. Their leader, Captain Arlen Vallis, invited Yalaron and a small council of other wizards to visit them. Yalaron accepted, though he made sure to come prepared, his staff humming with protective words. As he and his fellow wizards approached the camp, it became clear just how different these visitors were. Their tents were unlike anything seen in Arendelle's domes of metallic fabric that glowed faintly in the twilight. Strange devices blinked and beeped, and a soft hum permeated the air. The wizard beside Yalaron, a younger mugger named Kira, whispered, "This feels like magic, but it's not." Yalaron nodded, though he remained silent. They were greeted by Captain Vallis and his crew. The captain's armor, while practical, gleamed like the sun, and his face bore the calm, controlled look of someone used to dealing with dangerous things. "Welcome, elders of Arendelle," Vallis said, bowing slightly, though his formality was tempered by a smile. "We've prepared something that might interest you." Yalaron raised an eyebrow. "What is it you wish to show us, Captain?" Vallis gestured to a large, flat table in the center of the camp. A small object, no larger than an apple, hovered above it, rotating slowly. As the wizards watched, lines of light and data flowed around the object, showing images and symbols that shifted too fast to read. "This," Vallis began, "is a projection of your world." The wizards leaned in. Yalaron narrowed his eyes. He could sense no magic emanating from the object, yet it clearly displayed a vast amount of information. The map was more detailed than anything even the most powerful diviners in Arendelle could conjure. Kira looked to Yalaron, her curiosity barely contained. "This is remarkable," Vallis continued, his tone even and informative. "Our instruments allow us to observe, measure, and map your world with precision. What you see here is a representation of your land, your mountains, your rivers, all rendered in real time, thanks to our technology." Yalaron could feel the tension rising among the wizards. "Technology," he muggered, "and yet you claim it's not magic. How does it work?" Vallis seemed prepared for this question. He gestured to one of his crew, a woman with sharp eyes and hair the color of midnight. She stepped forward, holding a small device in her hand. "We use energy," she explained, "but not the same kind of energy that fuels your magic. It's a controlled form of power that allows us to bend light, manipulate matter, and measure the forces of nature in ways your world might not yet understand." Yalaron studied her carefully. "So, you admit it, you manipulate forces of nature, just as we do. You call it science, but it sounds no different from our magic." "Not quite," Vallis interjected. "We don't call upon external forces like you do. We don't rely on the inherent energies of the world, nor do we need to channel the life force of our surroundings. Our tools and devices harness what we know about the universe and its natural laws. For us, it's not a question of willpower or talent, it's about understanding and application." Yolaron felt a stirring of unease. Understanding, perhaps, but what if your science breaks the balance of this world? Magic and nature are entwined here. You claim not to draw on its energies, but what if your technology harms what you cannot sense? Valis met Yolaron's gaze. Serious now, that's why we're here. We've studied many worlds, and each is different. Yours is unique in that magic is a fundamental part of its fabric. We've taken care to avoid interfering with the flow of your magic. That's why we're asking for your cooperation to learn how we can coexist. Kira, fascinated, stepped closer to the projection. Can this technology, can it see into the future, like our scrying spells? The woman with the midnight hair smiled softly. Mo, we cannot predict the future, but we can model possibilities, understand patterns, and perhaps help prepare for what might come. Yolaron couldn't deny it any longer. There was something about their approach that felt reasonable. And yet, a danger lingered. He had heard tales of entire worlds ravaged by unchecked forces, both magical and otherwise. If these travelers were wrong, if their technology disrupted the balance of magic, it could mean catastrophe for Arendelle. Still, his curiosity remained. You've come to learn from us, Yolaron said slowly, but there is much you don't understand about our world. Magic is not simply a tool, it is life itself here. How do we know that your technology won't interface with that? Valis glanced at his crew, then back to Yolaron. We don't. That's why we're willing to collaborate. We want to share what we know, and we want to learn from you as well. Maybe together, we can find a way to make both magic and science work in harmony. There was a long silence as the wizards absorbed his words. Yolaron finally spoke, his voice steady. Very well, Captain. We will continue to observe your science, but note this: if your technology threatens our world, if it begins to tear at the fabric of magic itself, we will defend Arendelle with everything we have, and you will find that the fireballs and lightning you spoke of are only the beginning. Valis nodded solemnly. We would expect nothing less, Elder Yolaron. And so, an uneasy truce was formed. For now, science and magic would stand side by side, but both knew that the line between cooperation and conflict was as thin as a plasma blade's edge. To be continued. Weeks passed, and the scientists of the Starfire continued their studies in the land of Arendelle. At first, they worked cautiously, their every move monitored by the wizards who had been assigned to watch them. Yolaron, ever the wise elder, took particular interest in the ongoing experiments. He had lived long enough to see countless powers rise and fall, both magical and otherwise, and he was determined to ensure the balance of Arendelle was not upset by this strange, foreign science. But over time, a tentative cooperation began to form. The wizards, ever curious, found themselves drawn to the strange devices that could measure magic with eerie precision. Kira, the young Marga who had first marveled at the projection of their world, became something of a liaison between the wizards and the scientists. She spent her days moving between the camp and the towers of Arendelle's magical elite, reporting back on what the strangers had discovered. One evening, after a particularly long day of observations, Yolaron was approached by Kira in his study. They've created something new, she said, her voice brimming with both excitement and concern. Yolaron set aside the scroll he'd been reading. What have they done? Kira hesitated. They've combined our magic with their technology. Yolaron's brow furrowed deeply. What do you mean? They've found a way to channel magic through the machines, she explained. They've created a device that amplifies magical energy not by using our methods, but by enhancing it with their own energy sources. Yolaron's eyes narrowed. Show me. Together, they made their way to the edge of the camp, where a small group of scientists and wizards had gathered. At the center of the crowd stood Captain Valis, his normally calm demeanor replaced with cautious excitement. Next to him was a large machine, its metal surface covered in intricate symbols, runes of magic, woven into the machine's design. This, Valis said as Yolaron approached, is the culmination of our research thus far. We've combined your arcane forces with our technological understanding of energy. He gestured toward a tall wizard standing near the machine. The wizard, who Yolaron recognized as Master Thalrin, an expert in elemental magic, raised his staff and began to chant. The air around them grew thick with power as Thalrin called forth a stream of fire, bright, hot, and untamed. The flame burst forth from his staff, roaring like a living beast. But instead of allowing the fire to dissipate into the air, Valis activated the machine. The fire was drawn toward it, not absorbed in the way a magical artifact might consume energy, but amplified. The machine's runes glowed brightly, and the fire expanded, growing larger and more intense, yet more controlled. It burned brighter than any spell Yalaron had ever seen. The crowd gasped. Even Yalaron, with all his experience, could not help but be taken aback by the sight. Valis turned to him, his eyes gleaming with pride. We've created a system that allows us to enhance magic without draining the Mugger's power. It takes what your world provides naturally and increases its potency by a factor we couldn't achieve with technology alone. Yalaron's gaze remained fixed on the swirling inferno before him, its brightness reflected in his eyes. This could be dangerous, he said quietly. Valis nodded. We understand that, but it could also be revolutionary. Imagine what we could accomplish together. Your people are limited by how much energy they can personally channel. Our technology removes that limitation. Kira, standing beside Yalaron, seemed equally torn. This could change everything, she whispered. Yalaron's voice hardened. It could, or it could destroy everything. The fire dimmed as Thauron ended his spell, the machine powering down with a software. The crowd remained silent, their faces filled with awe, uncertainty, and fear. Yalaron turned sharply to Valis. You have crossed a line. Valis' expression shifted, his earlier excitement giving way to a more serious tone. We've been careful, Elder. We've made sure not to disrupt the natural flow of your magic. This device only amplifies what's already there. You don't understand, Yalaron said, his voice rising. Magic in Arendelle isn't a tool to be bent to one's will. It's a force of, naturally alive, intertwined with everything. By amplifying it, you risk unbalancing that force. Valis folded his arms. We've studied worlds with similar magical properties before, Yalaron. We've seen how magic can coexist with technology. You're worried because this is new, but I assure you, we're not here to destroy your way of life. Yalaron took a deep breath, his mind racing. He could feel the power lingering in the air from the demonstration, the resonance of magic that had been amplified beyond its natural state. He had seen such power before in times of great catastrophe. When magic was pushed beyond its limits, the consequences were always dire. This must stop, he said finally, his voice low but firm. If you continue down this path, you'll unleash forces you can't control. Kira, sensing the growing tension, stepped forward. Perhaps we should take a step back, Captain. We're only beginning to understand how our two worlds can work together. But Valis was not so easily dissuaded. With respect, Elder Yalaron, we've already proven that our methods work. We've amplified magic without any negative side effects. If we stop now, we'll lose valuable time. We could be on the verge of something truly groundbreaking. Yalaron shook his head, his hands gripping his staff tightly. You've learned much, Captain. But there are things you don't know, things you can't know. I've seen magic tear worlds apart, even without interference. You are meddling with forces you do not fully understand. Valis' eyes flickered with frustration, and you're clinging to the past, refusing to see the possibilities of the future. Before Yalaron could respond, a loud crack split the air, the ground trembled, and a sudden gust of wind whipped through the camp. The machine that had just powered down now sputtered and sparked, arcs of energy shooting from its surface. The scientists rushed forward, trying to shut it down, but the machine began to glow unnaturally bright. The air around it warped, shimmering as if reality itself were being stretched thin. The wizards in the crowd stepped back, raising their hands in defense as the magic in the area became unstable. The aftermath of the explosion left the camp in shambles. The air crackled with volatile, chaotic magic, and the once curious crowd of wizards and scientists now stood in stunned silence. Even the ground seemed to hum unnaturally, as though the very fabric of Arendelle was reacting to the disturbance. Yalaron, though shaken, forced himself to stand tall. He could feel the instability in the air's natural harmony of magic had been fractured. The very thing he had feared had come to pass. The untempered fusion of science and magic had gone too far. Now, reality itself was at risk. Captain Valis staggered to his feet, his face ashen. Elder Yalaron, we didn't intend this, he stammered. His confident demeanor had crumbled, replaced with disbelief and regret. Yalaron's gaze was as hard as stone. Intention means little when the damage is done. You've toyed with forces you did not understand. Nah, we must act before the consequences spread beyond this camp. Kira, bruised but conscious, rushed to Yalaron's side, her eyes wide with fear. Elder, the magic is unstable. It's spreading. If we don't contain it. I know. Yalaron cut her off, his tone heavy. If the rift created by the device is left unchecked, it could tear the very weave of magic apart. It will consume everything. Valis, his face filled with guilt, stepped forward. How can we help? We caused this. We'll do whatever it takes to fix it. Yalaron gave a grim nod. You may have unleashed it, but we'll need your technology to contain it. His staff glowed as he extended his senses, trying to measure the spread of the disturbance. The rift is growing. We don't have much time. The tension was palpable as the scientists and wizards scrambled to put a plan together. Valis and his crew, though shaken, quickly began to assess the damage done by their machine, while Yalaron and the wizards called upon their magic to try and stabilize the raw, chaotic energy now surging through the camp. Kira knelt beside the remnants of the device, her hands tracing the arcane runes etched into the metal. This was amplifying magical energy, she said, her voice tight with concentration. If we can reverse the amplification, we might be able to stabilize the rift. Valis, still dazed but resolute, nodded. We can reverse the energy flow, but we'll need to reconfigure the remaining components. It's a long shot, but it might just work. Yalaron turned to Valis, his expression stern but no longer hostile. Do it, but understand this: if you fail, it won't just be the camp that's destroyed. The entire magical balance of Arendelle will unravel. Valis met Yalaron's eyes. We won't fail. The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. Valis and his team worked feverishly to salvage what they could of their technology, while Yalaron and the wizards chanted incantations to keep the rift from growing. The rift pulsed, its raw magic distorting the air around it. Already, the trees nearby had begun to twist and warp, their branches bending in unnatural ways as the magic warped reality itself. We don't have much time, Yalaron muttered, his voice strained from the effort of maintaining the protective wards. Valis, his hands working quickly over a console, barked orders to his crew. Reroute the energy to the secondary stabilizer. If we can reverse the polarity, we can use the remaining power to neutralize the rift. Kira, standing at Yalaron's side, whispered an incantation under her breath, reinforcing the protective field. Her face was pale with concentration, but her eyes remained focused. Elder, it's getting stronger. Yalaron gripped his staff tighter. I know, Kira, hold the line. We must buy them time. The ground beneath them began to shake as the rift pulsed again, sending shockwaves through the camp. The magic in the air was thick and wild, threatening to overwhelm their spells. Yalaron could feel it pressing against his wards, like a storm battering against a fragile dam. Captain, Kira shouted, we're running out of time. Valis didn't look up from his work. Almost there, he called back. His fingers flew across the console, rerouting the remaining power to the damaged machine. Got it. Stabilizers ready. Yalaron nodded sharply. Nah. With a final command, Valis activated the stabilizer. A low hum filled the air as the machine came to life once more. This time, instead of amplifying the magic, it drew the chaotic energy toward itself, slowly draining the rift's power. The raw magic began to pull back, like a great storm being sucked into a vacuum. For a moment, it seemed as though they might succeed. But the rift fought back. With a deafening crack, the unstable magic surged, overwhelming the machine's capacity. The air shimmered as the rift expanded once again, more violently than before. A wave of energy blasted through the camp, knocking everyone to the ground. Yalaron, gasping for breath, struggled to his feet. He could feel the rift know its hunger, its chaos. It was no longer a simple anomaly. It had become a tear in the very fabric of magic, and it was growing stronger. There's no stopping it, he realized, his heart sinking. Not like this. Kira, her voice desperate, called out, Elder, what do we do? Yalaron's mind raced. They couldn't contain it with science alone. Magic couldn't stabilize it. There was only one solution, a dangerous, almost unthinkable one. We'll have to seal it, Yalaron said, his voice low but resolute. With both magic and technology, Together, Valis looked up, blood trickling from a wound on his forehead. Tha. Yalaron raised his staff, its tip glowing with ancient runes of power. We channel all of our energy, both magical and technological, into the rift. We force it to collapse on itself. Valis' eyes widened. That could kill us all. It's the only way to stop it, Yalaron replied, his voice steady. If we don't, Arendelle will be torn apart. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, with a determined nod, Valis stood and began issuing orders to his crew. You heard the Elder. We're doing this. Power up the remaining systems. Everything we've got goes into the rift. Kira looked to Yalaron. Are you sure about this? Yalaron smiled sadly. No, but sometimes, there is no choice. Valis, BRE,